Hi guys, it's Dr. Mitchell again, talking some more about creating and storing objects and instantiating those objects. In this video, we're going to create objects and call constructors and kind of look in more detail about how constructors work and which one is being used when we are creating our objects. So, what are we going to learn? We are going to look at or kind of refresh our memory about how every object is created using the new keyword, how classes contain constructors that are used to actually create those objects, and how we can use different classes and parameters in order to establish our state and our object's existence. So let's practice. So this time we're going to create an employee. We want to establish an employee that has a name, an employee ID, and a pay rate. So, and we also want to specify a salary for this employee, but we want to either establish or let the user provide the salary, or if they don't, we're going to set them to be paid at $20 an hour. So, based off of this little scenario, what attributes do I need to define? So, I know that I have name, employee ID, and pay rate. So those would be attributes that I would want to define for my employee. And there's also mention of a salary, but that salary might be different depending on whether or not the user gives it, or if I'm just going to give them a default pay. So based off of that, I'm going to create my instance variables, string name, employee ID, and pay. So that name, of course, will be a string. The employee ID I'm going to set as a string because rather than using that as an integer, since I can't actually do math or anything like that with an employee ID, so I'm going to set that as a string. And then I'm going to set my pay as an int because for the purpose of this, I'm just going to set them with a whole number pay rate. So I can have my default constructor that's going to set all of those values equal to null because if I'm just creating a default employee, they might not have a name or an employee ID or a pay. So those will all get established to those data types default values. Then I will also create a constructor that does actually initialize all three of those attributes with the information that's provided by the user. So if the user gives me the name, the employee ID, and how much they're going to get paid, then I'm going to use that information to create my object, my employee object. I'm also going to include, because if the employee is not created with a specified pay, then I'm going to pay them a default pay of $20 an hour. So in order to do that, I'm just going to have a constructor that's just going to set the name and the employee ID, but then I'll set the pay to that $20, so that way when I create the employee with that, the pay will get set to $20. So now when I go to create the employee, here's one example. If I create a new employee with the variable name person1 and give the values Simon, 7628, and 60,000. Take a moment to write this statement down on a piece of paper. Once you do so, circle the assignment operator and the new keyword. Then underline the variable type and the constructor. Then draw a rectangle around the list of actual parameters that are being passed. So you should have circled the equals new, because the equal sign is my assignment operator, and then I have the new keyword. The variable type is employee, and the constructor is, of course, right before those the parentheses for my parameters. And then I'm putting a rectangle around the actual parameters that are being passed. So this is what you should have. When I'm looking at this example, remember that I do have 3 constructors in my employee object. So in this case, which constructor is being called? Calling the second one. because I'm passing 3 parameters. First 2 are strings and the last one is an integer. So I can match that up with that second constructor. Take a moment to create 3 more employee objects of your own based off of one or more of these constructors. Okay, here are some of my examples. I have employee person 2 equals new employee. So this is calling that last constructor that just has the 2 parameters. Person 3 is using the default constructor or no argument constructor. So this employee, person 3, is going to have all default values. And then I have person 4 that's going to use that second constructor that I had that has 3 parameters that will set a name, an employee ID, and a pay according to what's passed to the constructor. So based off of this, what we walk away now knowing is that our objects are created using the keyword new. We can use a whole bunch of different types of constructors to actually create our objects. And remember, those constructors always have the same name as the class. And I can use parameters both in the signature and in my constructor call to initialize the state of my object. So thanks. See you guys next time.